What if the secret to success wasn't just talent or hard work, but unshakable confidence? Welcome to Grasp Confidence, the podcast where visionary thought leaders, speakers, and entrepreneurs unlock the mindset and strategies for lasting success. I'm your host, Tara LaFon Gooch, CEO, two-time best-selling author, and international TEDx speaker, and I can't wait to help you step into the most powerful version of yourself. Let's dive in. Dan Roth is a TEDx speaker, Amazon best-selling author, and strategic people operations leader on a mission to build a more inclusive world. Diagnosed as neurodivergent at a young age, Dan has turned his lived experience into powerful advocacy across mental health, neurodivergency, and human rights. From corporate leadership to nonprofit impact, he's been featured in major outlets such as the New York Times and Wall Street Journal. And today, he's here to challenge how we think about inclusion, leadership, and belonging. Dan, welcome to the show.
Oh, wow. It's been a long time coming, Tara. How are you? Thank you for having me. This is a conversation I've been waiting for. So thank you.
Of course. Well, you and I connected pretty thoroughly, I would say, on LinkedIn. Uh,
Yeah.
just a couple, what was it, just last week or so? And we had such a great conversation. I was like, all right, all right. We had been connected for a long time on LinkedIn and we just really connected on a deeper level. And I said, you know what? Come on the show. We got to talk about this. So thanks
Well,
for taking me up on that.
timing's everything. And I think for a lot, if we look at just the process of when we both started, and especially when I started, there was such a learning curve that right now I'm in the best place, the best version of myself that I've ever been. So for your benefit, for the audience's benefit, they're going to be getting a lot better than they would have even 2 years ago. Right place, right time, right moment, and it's exciting.
So, talk to me about that because I think, as human beings, we should be always evolving, adapting, and always trying to step into that, best versions of ourselves, whatever that looks like. Um, we're never fully there. That's the key, I think, right? It's not a race you can win. There's no finish line. There's no end, as it were, right? But it's always something that we're going toward if we are a person that is adaptable and willing to change and transform. So I'm glad you said that because that's the whole journey of life, isn't it?
It is, and your last episode you talked about TEDx, and what's interesting about like all these things integrated is, as you know, like I just did mine, and a lot of people look at different moments in their lives as being the precipice where they go to that they have this long-term goal, but they don't think past it. How do you launch from there onto the next segmentation? So when I did my TEDx in January, you know, I can't even say that TEDx was a long-term goal of mine, but it wasn't like my dream thing. It was always something I knew that I could use as a
Yeah.
launching pad. And I think one of the things that people that have been following me for a decent amount of time have known is that if you expect me to be the person that I was 6 months ago, you're probably following the wrong person. Now, ethically, morally, I'm always going to be at my core, like very centered, but the details and the integrations are going to look fairly different.
I like that. And I like the fact that TEDx is not the ultimate goal for you. So many TEDx speakers, they think of it as the top of the mountain, but I always tell people, the top of one mountain's the bottom of another. What are you going to do with it? And it's not about, I'm not trying to say chasing what's next. It's not a chase, but it's about not having that as like the end all be all bucket list. Like what else can you do with it and how else can you improve and what can you launch after that? And I think there's a lot of power in that, right? That not thinking of something as the end all be all, just thinking of it as the launch pad to something bigger and better. And I think a lot of people stay stuck because they get to that like precipice of whatever that is. And then contentment sets in, comfortability sets in, and they say, I'm done.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's important. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah, and I think the mistake is actually earlier on. I don't even want to call it a mistake because mistakes would indicate that it was almost an intentional nature. So
Yeah.
the way that I approach this and the way that a lot of that's maybe a little bit different than a lot of other people is when we talk about TEDx, a lot of people bring out these big ideas, but the big ideas are isolated entities that really don't have any variance in which direction they could go. When I looked at my speaking career, when I looked at what message I was trying to convey, what I was really looking at is this part of my umbrella? And if it's part of my umbrella, then there's all these other legs that can be gone to. So it's just one story as part of a larger component. And when you do that, not only does that leave an audience wanting more, which is ultimately the goal as professional speakers, but as TEDx organizers, whether you're trying to do another TEDx at the same location or like me, I now want to do one in my current city, not my hometown because I grew up in Jersey and I'm in California now. Um, but it leaves them understanding that there's that place. And now if they do choose you or if they reach out to you, you're gonna have something that is gonna have that same essence, but fit a different message. And
I
that's such a clear point that, yeah, I think goes overlooked.
I love that. That's such a good point. Well, let's talk about your TEDx because I watched it. It was very powerful, very vulnerable, and I really appreciate a TEDx talk that goes into the vulnerability and is not afraid of it. So many TEDx speakers, they wanna look perfect. They wanna look so polished. They wanna look like they've never made a mistake in their life, that they're this subject matter expert and consummate professional, and it's always been this way. And they're afraid to go into the vulnerable. But I have found that when you go into the vulnerable, that's where people meet you because they see a part of themselves in your story. So, if you don't mind, I would love to kind of take the audience into your TEDx talk, the backstory of it as well, and
Sure.
why did you choose that topic and idea to present on the TEDx stage?
So before I dive into that, let's break the fourth wall down for a little bit. You talked about perfection. What most people
Yeah.
don't realize when they're watching these TEDx's is that's for the editing room, that perfection.
That's right.
Like, so my cohort had 30 people in it. And I, so my talk was in Texas. It was in Third Ward. Uh, and so when I went there, I really didn't know anybody there. So I stayed for all 30 of the talk. So I got to see it from front.
30.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
From front. I know it was massive. From front to back. And I could tell you that there wasn't a single person that didn't go in nervous. There wasn't a single person that didn't pause for a moment, that didn't stutter or there was not a single person that felt completely comfortable. So what you're seeing is very much an edited version of what these people are going through. Now, going back to mine, so whether you want to call this a plus or a benefit or something sad, that's up to you. But I was diagnosed neurodivergent when I was 5 years old. So I'm 41 now. I had a lifetime to look at myself and what I was going through and to become really self aware. I developed an eating disorder as part of that, as well as body dysmorphia. And for clarity for your audience, I have binge eating disorder. And body dysmorphia, for those that are not aware, is you have an inability to look at yourself in the mirror with satisfaction.
Mhm.
You feel disgusted by what you're looking at. It leads to a lot of anxiety, depression.
Yeah.
There's we could get into the exact terminology. So I developed all this in addition to my neurodivergence, and I never knew what the eating disorder was. I knew I had one, I didn't know what it was called, and I certainly didn't know what body dysmorphia was because men couldn't have body issues, uh,
Right.
until much later on. The reason I chose it is because I was applying to TEDx for something like 5 years. Back when the beginning of the pandemic started, I would go into the clubhouse rooms for those that remember that, and I would go into these speaker areas, and I met my current coach. She's one of my best friends, my family, and I'm Washington, and we started working together in looking at, well, how could we develop something that would really help get me off the ground? And I tried all different topics, and then it got to a certain point where I'm thinking, well, what is at the core of who I am? What is the core of what I do? And that is, you no matter what you're talking to me about on a certain day, it will almost always lead back to that. And that's
Mm,
parenting and my kids. And
yeah.
one of the things that my wife and I are really strong on is showcasing this vulnerability and not bring our kids up with this invincibility complex. Especially as a male, I want to break that barrier down so that there's not an uneven distribution of emotional labor and our kids could see that mommy and daddy both struggle or both equal. So once I realized that, I looked at it, and my first variation was talking about eating disorder and body dysmorphia and then leading into being a domestic violence and sexual assault survivor. But as you know, we have to isolate topics. So I decided on using that as my first and going through that. And I could tell you, I had the story down, but I was panicking right up until the night before. Like it was on a Saturday, January 10th. And Friday, I was still in panic mode because I'm not used to memorizing my talks. That's
Right.
just not who I am. But with TED, you have to be so specific. So it puts this massive amount of stress on you. So, like, I just want Friday night, I just want to get through like one rough rehe- rehearsal in my hotel room, barely get through it, get up there the next day. I'm like, okay, well, this is put up or shut up time. And I went up there and I remember the first minute, and then the rest I had to watch back.
Isn't that funny? I know. I know exactly how that feels, right? And I'm going through this process again myself. I said I would never do it again after the first one because it's a
It's a
lot more
lot.
pressure than people realize, and it is not easy to memorize a speech, and I'm glad that my next one is only 6 minutes. I can manage 6 minutes. It's after that it's hard,
Yeah.
right?
This
It's tough.
mine was 10. I wound up going over a little bit, uh, but yeah, it's extremely, extremely tough.
Yeah.
And I think people get the wrong idea because you're talking about your story,
Mhm.
your history, it must be easy. Well, no, because in addition to talking about your story, you're thinking about the lights, the camera, the fact you only have like this little circle to stand in. And there's so many other idiosyncrasies that come with it. But, you know, I'm very hard on myself. But
Mhm.
I remember like the moment that I'll never forget is I walk off the stage and I hear my coach Emma going, "Yes, that's the way you effing do it." And, and
That's
"O-
right.
I'm like, okay. Now watching it back, I'm still self-critical. Like
Of course.
listening to it now, I said to her, I said, I could have done A, B, C, D, and E better. And then here's the other part people don't realize. Once it's actually put out there, which is like 8 to 10 weeks later, now you're constantly checking the views.
You're right.
And my views are not great on this. I've less than 400 views in the 3 weeks it's been out there, but here's the thing, when you're breaking into a new category, when you're talking about something that people are not willing to talk about, when you don't have as much as I have 40 something thousand followers and quote unquote name recognition, I'm still not getting it blessed out there. And because it's a tough thing for people to talk about.
Yeah.
And I have to understand that. And at the end of the day, that's where I have to remind myself I did what I was supposed to do. It's gonna reach who it's meant to reach, and use this as one step on a larger ladder. And if we do that, then we stop analyzing the impact of rungs and we start looking at the impact as a whole. And that's a lot larger.
Absolutely. And we can put our worth and our value on a number, and we know how good that's going to go for us in the long run, right? You talked about body dysmorphia. We can do the same thing. We can look at a scale and put our worth on that number. We can look at our pant size, our dress size, whatever, put our worth on that number. We can look at our TEDx talk, right? And put our worth on that number. And at the end of the day, it's really easy to do because we live in a world of instant gratification where our value as human beings is tied up to these arbitrary numbers that really don't mean anything. But the fact that you did what you sought to do, that's the value. That you expressed truth on the stage, that's the value, right? And I think it's more intangible, right? And harder to kind of pin down sometimes. But honestly, that's where the impact is really at. And you're right. To your point, maybe people are uncomfortable hearing it. Maybe it's an uncomfortable topic. But honestly, those are the best ones, in my opinion. Those are the ones I really want to watch. I don't want to watch something to be comfortable. I want to watch something that challenges me. I want to watch a talk that makes me think differently. And I want to hear ideas from people with that lived experience like you have.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I am 100% with you. I mean, maybe I'm going to speak too loudly for a second, but a lot of the topics that get chosen for TEDx, I think all of us are like, what the F did they choose this
Yeah.
for?
I know. I
Uh,
know.
there were some ones that I looked at, I'm like, this is just completely ego driven. And then there's ones that surprise you,
Yep.
uh, and then the others that you enjoy.
Yep.
So, I mean, like I said, there were 30 people in the cohort. I remember, if I really think back, like which ones made an impact on me, I would say maybe 5.
Yep.
That doesn't mean I didn't like more of them. I want to be very clear, but th- the ones that made like a clear, concise impact that I will carry that message, very small number.
Very small number. Absolutely. And I think, to your point, a lot of speakers do this for the wrong reason. You mentioned ego drive. I think that's a very prevalent thing that I've seen as well. They want it to increase their business, their brand, sell books, whatever. And it can, but I don't think that's the reason you do something, right? Because I think in the intention behind the things that we do is an energy that's felt. It's an energy that's felt by the audience. It's the energy that's felt by the organizer, fellow speakers, people online, whatever. And when you do something with the wrong intention, the wrong energy is perceived by others. So I think that's important. What do you think about that? Am I right on with that?
I think you're 100% right on. I also think that people overestimate the impact it has. You know,
Mm,
we
yeah,
so everybody wants to say in their surname, I'm a TEDx speaker. Back 3 years ago, everybody was like, I worked for Amazon. I worked for Google. I work like, what does that mean now? When it gets to a point where so many people are doing it, it loses its value.
right.
So I'm not negating the impact of this, but at the same time, like people definitely overplay their hand.
Yeah.
I know I apologize. My brain is working a million directions, so I don't know if I specifically answered your question.
No, I think we hit it right on the head, but I think this is something that, I challenge people with because I coach TEDx speakers, right? So when somebody comes to me, I don't coach everybody that wants to work with me. I coach, a select few because I think the motive and the intention's important. I think also I always tell people I can take subject matter expertise and turn that into a really great message and idea, but I can't make you a subject matter expert, right? So I think that's another important thing too. I think we live in an age where everybody is a subject matter expert, but nobody's an expert at anything anymore. So I think that's important too. I don't know what I would call that per se,
No, I know what you mean.
but you know what I mean by that?
I I do. It's it's like going to college and being required to do, your general education. You're forced to get all these different pieces of it, but by doing that, it really does make it hard for anybody to be an exact expert. And people, when people feel like they're in danger of not being, then they try to invent their own stuff,
Yeah.
which drives me nuts. And get in I can't get into that on air, but there is a specific situation in my mind that that was the driver for that. But as far as coaching, I give you a lot of respect. Like, you,
Oh, thank you.
are my 2 favorite coaches for TEDx because I understand how hard it is to get people to fit in, but I also get, and here's the more critical piece. For me, it's not necessarily always about the talk and the message as it is the methodology and the way that you present it. And it's a
That's
lot
true.
easier to get people to curate the story, but if they can't convey it in a way that's going to capture the audience, if they don't understand inflection and tonality and when to rise and when to low, then no matter what they do, they're going to wind up sounding like a robot. And for a lot of these people, they're only getting a month and a half, 2 months max from the time that they're accepted to TEDx. So they're going in at a deficit where what I'm talking about I mean, they may be natural, but it may take months or years. And with TEDx, you don't get paid for that. So it's not like you're recuperating your money unless you're able to turn ROI based on your talk, but you can't count on that.
Right. Exactly. No, that is such a good point. And what I do like about TEDx is that it's taking that complex story, complex idea, whatever, and if you can convey that into one sentence, right? In TEDx, it's called the thorough line.
Mhm.
What is your idea in one sentence? And one of the common things that I see with speakers is that they have 5 ideas and they think they have 1 idea, but they have like 5, right? And you talked about that, like going into it, you wanted to kind of talk about this and that and this, but then you realize that that was a couple ideas and you only had 10 minutes. So it's about picking that one concise distilled message, which is often not easy. I went through this with my own TEDx journey and my first TEDx. Um, I have the GRASP method, GRASP. That's what this podcast's named after. But that's way too long for a TEDx talk, and it's 5 ideas, not 1. So I had to think of that one message. What was that? And that was gratitude is the first step or the foundation of confidence. Well, boom, that's a TEDx idea, right? And turning that into a thorough line now. So I thought of my idea, turned it into an idea now in one sentence. What does that mean? And then built a framework to build the talk from that was based on, Chris Anderson's formula for TEDx. And I think that's not easy. I think it's a bit of an art form. And it certainly requires some coaching because
Oh,
we
yeah.
can't really see the holes in our own ship. And we write a talk and we love it and we don't want to change it. And then somebody else sees it and they say, but what about this and that and that? And that, what is your idea? And then they ask you a couple questions and you're like, drawing board, going back to the drawing board.
Yeah. And like the format for TEDx, because I know we're both on LinkedIn, I'll use this as example,
Mhm.
is very much like a resume. You have specific sections that you have to include, and you
Right.
really can't deviate very much from that. So, for a lot of
Right.
people, myself included, the difficulty is fitting inside that box, and
Mhm.
almost all the people I know is like, "I don't fit in a box, I don't fit in." Well, you chose. There's a difference between choice in the real world and
Right.
choice in what you get involved in. You made a
Right.
choice to apply for TED. It is their way of doing things, so now you have to format it in that way. So, you got your intro, you got your story, why is it important? You got your middle piece, and then advice on how to make curate change, followed by your close. And almost regardless of whether it's a 6-minute talk, 10, 15, I think the max I've ever heard is 18 or 20.
Mhm. Mhm.
Every single one is going to follow that format. So how can you, and that was the biggest piece. I went through, I could even show you this because I kept all of it. I went through maybe 20 rewrites, maybe more,
Wow.
because I needed to, like, at a certain point, you start off being like, okay, well, I have to keep this because this is exactly who I am. And then you realize the more you go through it, is this really integral? Is this fitting into the streamline process? And then at a certain point, if you do it right, you're like, okay, well, now my foot fits in the shoe. And it's only then that you're able to. And the reason I did so many rewrites is because I'm a perfectionist, but also the event that I did. So not everybody's going to be as introspective as me, and that's not a pat on my back. But I did this in Third Ward, Houston, and Third Ward, Houston, for those that don't know, is the birthplace of Juneteenth. Also, for those that don't know, I've worked in the DEI sector, diversity, equity, inclusion. I've had sponsors, Future Cane specifically, and some others that took me in
Mhm.
and mentored me. So for me to be doing a talk in one of the central liberation points in the South was a huge, huge deal for me. And I felt like if I didn't pay them the respect to do this the right way, then I would be leaving something on the table.
Hmm. I love that though. It's about being a professional and showing up and honoring someone that gave you an opportunity. I think we don't do that enough. We sometimes just expect things to happen to us, right? And then don't reciprocate. But I think the best thing that we can do, not just as speakers, but anybody, right? This is advice for life, is to, when someone gives you an opportunity, whatever that looks like, to reciprocate, to show, you know, honor to them, right? And to really elevate them too, and not just say, thanks for the opportunity and walk away. I've seen
Yeah.
this at pretty much every single event that I've ever coached at or been involved with, that there are, there's somewhat of a sense of entitlement out there that, okay, I got this. It's all about me now. Right?
Yeah.
Have you seen that? I'm sure you have.
I've seen it a ton.
Yeah.
And those people that do that, I will not acknowledge and I will not promote
Right.
because it's my name on the line. And I'll give everybody an example of how things sort of come full circle. So I do have a fairly large social media presence. And one of the things I like to do is to promote people. So after the talks were done, I chose to use my newsletter, which has a decent amount of subscribers. And I embedded the TEDx because I knew that that would help increase their reach. And some of these
Mhm.
people just don't have a large social media presence. So how else are they really going to gain visibility? I chose not to include everybody from my cohort.
Right.
And
I
that was
think I
very
saw that newsletter, by the way, because I'm
I
subscribed.
there were yeah, there were 2.
Yeah.
So I did part 1, part 2, and there's going to be a part 3 because there's 1 or 2 that have taken a long time to come out, that I want to include. So and I wasn't doing that because I wanted anything back. I was doing it because, like, this is how I show respect
Yeah, of course.
when I have respect. But there were, you know, I'll talk about one specific situation in particular. There was a situation where there was a gentleman that was doing his TEDx talk. He got done, and the next person in his cohort uh, was doing a talk on sexuality. And this gentleman had either relatives or kids in the audience. And the entire time that she was talking, they were
Snickering.
snickering, laughing. And I understand that kind of thing is silly for kids. We've all,
Oh, I see.
my
Right.
daughter's 6.5, and,
Yeah.
she's telling fart jokes just like I did when I was that age. But at a certain point, this is a serious moment for someone. This is a door. You know, if they're not gonna behave, then you need to take them out.
Mhm,
You could bring
mhm,
them back, but you need to take them out for that talk, and this person didn't do that. So, when I didn't necessarily blame the person directly because, they're off doing their thing, but it was their family. But when the time came for me to make a decision on who am I gonna include, that person's name wasn't there because I
mhm,
felt like I'm not gonna pay you the respect if your family, your situation is not gonna pay this other person the respect. And by the way, this person was chosen to be featured by TEDx as one of the premier ones on the TEDx YouTube stage, which I'm happy about for her because she deserves it. She worked really hard on it, um, especially after what she went through. There was another situation. Can I get into this? I'm not
leave
sworn to
names
se
out, leave names out.
Yeah, I'm not sworn to secrecy, but and it's very well known that I've had a major issue with this.
Okay.
There was one particular person. So again, I'm gonna preface this, it was in 3rd ward.
Mhm,
When
mhm,
we look at the bulk majority of individuals that spoke, the bulk majority were based on the location. They did not look like me.
mhm.
I'm gonna leave it there. One of the people that did made multiple interruptions during our sessions with our coach, uh, very much didn't show appreciation for the opportunity. And then the day of the show comes, this person's in the second group or whatever it was, goes through, and then 3 hours later, last group of the day, and I see him come back up and he does his talk again. And I come to find out that after his talk, he went and was crying to the producers that he missed so many sections and this was so important to him and he had to redo it.
Yeah,
Okay. In Earlier on in our conversation, we said that I made a mention that nobody did it perfectly. Everybody paused.
right.
There was Everybody had something that they probably missed that they wish they
Yeah,
could go and redo. What kind of privilege,
right.
what kind of destiny
Yeah.
bullshit, pardon my language, do you have that you have the right to go in when nobody else has and do that?
Yes. Can I tell you a story?
Please, I'd love
So,
to hear it.
okay, so why I became a TEDx coach, I think this is a really interesting story because it echoes this exactly. So when I delivered my TEDx talk in England, so it was overseas, right? We had 6 months to practice and rehearse before our talk went live. I got selected in June and then delivered the talk in January. And I think there was 8 people on the stage. The person that went right before me totally bombed, like, couldn't remember any of her lines, and then I went. So, imagine that pressure, right? You just saw somebody, like, totally bombed, and of course you think it's gonna happen to you. And then I delivered my speech, and then the person who went right after me, the same thing happened, he bombed, and it was to the point where he was like, "Line, next line, please, next line, please." And I saw this, and again, I was kind of sandwiched in between this, and they both asked the organizer, "Hey, do you think you can edit this to just make it fly?" And to her credit, she refused to because she said, "You did not meet the standard of TEDx. You had the same amount of time as everybody else. You're supposed to be professionals and show up professionally. You knew the standard. You knew this was a memorized speech." And she didn't air those talks. And I think about that moment all the time because as I was sitting in that audience and I watched it bomb, and I looked out in the audience and there's their families in the audience, their neighbors, their coworkers, people like that. And I said, "Oh my gosh, I don't want this to happen to anybody else. Maybe, right? I can help other people so it doesn't happen to them." That was kind of my thought. But it was very similar to that, but at least to her credit, she did she was like, "Nope, you didn't meet the standard." But I don't think people talk about that enough, Dan. Like, people
They
don't talk
don't.
about it, that that's actually a possibility and can happen,
Oh, people bomb all the time, but here
all the time.
the thing about it is that nobody knows that you're bombing unless you're
Right.
just, like, overtly horrible,
Yeah.
except for you. And I
Yeah.
think that's I'm glad we brought this up because that's sort of a centralized point that I need to I wanna make sure that people understand.
Mhm.
A lot of people made mistakes, a lot of people left things out, but the audience is not gonna know any different.
That's right.
So, if you're the only person that knows that you bombed and you look back and the editors can put something together that makes sense, it may be a situation where that goes super viral, you don't know. So, but they're not gonna do that if you don't show the respect. Now,
Right.
our particular organizer is a people pleaser, and he made the choice that he made. I'm not going to I wasn't in his position. I'm not going to judge him for it, but I can judge the person. And I'm somebody that tries to be as open as I can to everybody regardless. I just have a tough time when individuals use their privilege as a way of getting over in situations that they have no right to do so.
Yeah. How do you oh my gosh. I mean, like I said, I've seen this at every single TEDx event. So this is not new to me at all. But, I think it has a lot to do with emotional intelligence and just self-awareness as well. I don't know how to convey this to somebody if they don't have emotional intelligence because
You
I
can't.
mean, I know there was a Harvard study a couple years ago or something that said, most people, 95% of people think they're emotionally intelligent, but in reality it's like 10 to 15% of us. So,
Mm, well,
right?
yeah, and I laughed because I'll send you the link to the talk after.
Mhm.
I'll leave it that. Uh, People believe they have emotional intelligence because they say if they feel like if I have the ability to say I made a mistake or I'm sorry, then automatically that means that they're emotionally intelligent.
Mm.
But what I have found, especially working with the neurodiverse and special education population, is very often our idea of emotional intelligence is utilizing what would make us feel better, what we would do as a way to support other people. Real emotional intelligence is looking at a situation and asking, why is this person feeling this way? What do they need that would fit how they operate in order to support them? Or do they not need any support? Do they need to be left alone? And the biggest thing about self-awareness is the awareness that you can ask, hey, how can I support you instead of making those assumptions?
Mm.
So this entire idea that we're all socially or intelligent creatures is a fallacy that's brought in by how we're raised, by nurture, and it's not taking because it's easier to do that than to take a look at what our actual surroundings are, what our actual feelings are, and realize it's a lot more complicated than we give credit for. And it takes a lot more energy because no two people are alike. To figure out how you could be emotionally intelligent for everyone you interact with on any given day is exhausting. But I'd rather be exhausted by the end of the day and pay them the respect than lack emotional intelligence and basically create a fabricated world to live in.
Mm, I love that. Dan, I am so happy you came on this show today. I
Me
think we really jammed it out, and this is exactly what I was hoping for. I wasn't really sure what direction we would go with our conversation,
me
but
either.
yeah, and I like that. I like that. You told me, "Don't ask me questions beforehand, I won't read them." And you know what? I'm the same way. I don't like pre-rehearsed talks. I don't like pre-rehearsed conversations with people on podcasts. And just, for the people listening today, a lot of times the guests that come on this show, it's my first time actually meeting them. And people think, oh, I've just known these people for 20 years, right? But this is actually our very first conversation that we have had. We
Yeah.
talked, over DMs on LinkedIn, but this is the first time we actually hopped on a call and like met each other. But that's the power of, this platform, and when you find aligned people that you just know, I just can feel it. And I'm just so grateful that you decided to come on and share this wisdom with us today and with the audience today. I will certainly put the link to your TEDx talk in the show notes so
Yeah.
people can watch it, and your book as well. You've got a couple things
Yeah.
going on, Dan.
So I appreciate you bringing that up. So
Of course.
I had an opportunity to take part in an anthology, and
Mhm.
anthologies are not something I've always gravitated towards
Mhm.
because I've been on sort of a mission to write my own book for 25 years, but I never thought I had the arc. But a good friend of mine out of Florida, her name's Michelle Jewsbury, created this book, Breaking the Silence: Voices of Survivors. And she also holds speaking events. And her event was the first time I spoke about my experience being a survivor of domestic violence. So when she approached me about taking part in the book, I'm like, well, if ever I'm going to do it, this is it. So here's the really cool thing about the TEDx and about this. If you
Mhm.
watch the TEDx, it's about my experience with body dysmorphia and eating disorder. What I do in the book is I take that experience and then I link that to being a survivor of sexual assault and domestic violence and how trauma influences. And in
Mm.
both cases, whether it's the TEDx or this, everything leads back to how my experience has shaped how I parent. Because I'm a firm believer that the only change is going to come when we start teaching our kids differently and
Yeah.
approaching parenting from a different perspective. So everything I do does have that thread. It does have that link. And that I think that allows people to really feel like they're learning about me as an individual and they have a glimpse into my life that you wouldn't normally see. And that's what I try to build with my audiences, that empathetic bond over shared experience and how I, as a white male, can create a bridge where without having these conversations, I wouldn't be able to.
I love that. And I love your just again that vulnerability, that bravery too, because not a lot of men talk about the things that you talk about. They're ashamed of it. They look back at it as something that they should never speak on. And because of that, a lot of men feel alone, isolated. A lot of men are suffering from depression, loss of connection with others. And I mean, I've encountered several men where they feel like they don't have a friend because they don't feel like anybody will understand them, that they've been, abuse survivors, sexual assault survivors, that they have, eating disorders and so forth. And I think the more men talk about this, like you who are brave, the better this entire world will be. So I really appreciate you just being you and coming out and talking about these things because when we share our story, It's almost like answering a prayer for somebody else who just wants to feel seen, heard, and valued.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you saying that, and, I'm definitely looking to take more stages, preferably getting
Mhm.
paid and then talking about this, but, you know, to your point, one of the hard things is it varies by cultural dynamic.
Yeah.
So, if we look at it, Black families are gonna have different perspectives and different cultural upbringings, but
Mhm.
also something I'll just bring this up briefly. I was having a conversation about the other day is that when we talk about bonding over these things, a lot of the hurt that's caused is and the reason that we're quiet is because it's other men. So, like, if
Yeah.
we look at bullying, if we look at the shame, if we look at all of the locker room talk, whatnot, a lot of it's being brought on by fellow men. So while there's a need for us to talk about it, it's sort of like, well, okay, well, I'm talking about it, but I'm also expected to bond with my abuser.
Mm.
And that is something I personally struggle with because I do have an internal bias against other men that I'm very aware of and trying to break down. Um, so there's a lot that goes into it, but the reason for that is because we're talking about trying to heal generations and generations of
Right.
trauma. So this is a great first step.
I love that. I love that. Hopefully, I see you in Cali when I come in July. We'll
You
see.
better.
It's funny. Yeah, I know, right? It's so funny. I'm in your neck of the woods, sort of. So, love it.
Well,
Dan,
you got to
so
let me know what my neck of the woods is because people say my neck of the woods and then it's like 2.5 hour drive.
I know, right? California is a big, long state. So,
Yeah.
anyway, well, love it. Dan, where can everybody find you and learn more about you so that they can book you to speak and check out your book as well?
Yeah. So the easiest way is I'm everywhere. Uh, I
He
made an
is.
email, bookdan to speak at gmail.com, made it really easy. LinkedIn is obviously a very easy one. I'm part of Gravity Speaker Bureau, TikTok, Instagram. I have a Talk It Up page, really anywhere. But if you're looking to book me, bookdan to speak at gmail.com. And as far as my book goes, you could buy it on Amazon. But if you want a signed copy and if you want money going to the author, then reach out to me and I'll send you a signed copy. And for every book that I sell, depending on how many books I could buy in bulk because shipping is high, $5 goes to special education in our school district.
I love that. Wonderful. Always giving back. That's my guy, Dan. Love it.
I'm
Well,
trying.
Dan, thank you so much for being a guest on this show today. And thank you for everyone who tuned into this episode of Grasp Confidence Podcast. Guys, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, follow, and leave a review on Apple so that more people tune in and see the value of doing so. We only grow based on your shares, based on how many people leave reviews based on how many people follow the show. So keep following, keep sharing. We appreciate every single one, and we will see you on the next episode. Take care.